And our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, will give us a technical presentation on the 2026 education budget, showcasing the achievements, the funding shortages, and the potential to increase finance in the 2027 national budget. At this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite the Zimbabwe Teachers Association Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Sifiso Ndlovu, to come up and make his presentation. Let's appreciate him as he comes on the stage.
Thank you very much. As I am being helped here to start the presentation, yes, I want to appreciate what the speakers before me have said. From the opening remarks by Madam Zambogo, by address by the President of the Zimbabwe Teachers Association, and also keeping it up, the address by the chairperson of the portfolio committee in Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education. The team seemed to be singing from the same hymn book. It is a national anthem which we all believe in. We must fund education. Somewhere, somehow, I have found a symbiosis in the discussions that you made, that you all believe that we should make, once again, public education system work in Zimbabwe, work it for the good of our future and the future of our children. And to help me emphasize on what you have already said, I just want to share a few statistics and development as we discuss. And in my presentation, I give you the sources of my information are given there, so that you may not accuse me of fishing them out from Norway, but I need really to be as scholastic as possible to tell you that these are the general sources of what I'm going to talk to you about. Which way do I move? Okay, I'll use my fingers. Is it a touch screen? Okay, thank you. If it is a touch screen, then I'll use my fingers as well. In the discussion that I'm going to lead, these are some of the questions I am requesting that members of Parliament, as we go for the next round of our discussion in Parliament, should ask or should find solutions to. First, we must situate ourselves. Why are we talking about education in Zimbabwe? Are we just talking about it because it is popular? It is something that makes us familiar, or that makes us popular in our constituencies? Certainly no. There is a situation analysis that we must make for our own country, which compels us to talk about education. Then we look at the numbers, and obviously the numbers must speak, and we are going to look at the numbers in terms of the budget and the gross domestic product. What does that mean in real terms for supporting the budget? And obviously the budget share, which most of us are used to, and because we discuss the budget almost twice or thrice a year. And then we shall find out, why is the budget share and the GDP share not converging? Why are we opting for the budget share and not the GDP share? So that we can understand the difference. And we'll check the credibility of whether what Parliament has approved finally gets to the learner. Does it get to the learner finally? Because every year the budget and education is number one. But is that number one always number one at disbursement? That is the critical factor. You said it all. Every decision that we make, there is a learner. It does that decision that we made about money with the learner. We have to deal with that. And then we go beyond the headlines. What is the society saying? So as we enter into this, I need to premise my discussion with you on these factors. Obviously, under our campaign, which we have started years ago, and we continue to stand by that campaign as Zimbabwe Child Association and our colleagues from other trade unions, that let us go public. Let's fund education. There is a trend, honorable members, of celebrating private education in Zimbabwe. And the danger is that when we celebrate privatization of education, we're actually calling for the downfall of public systems. And when we kill public systems, we are saying the government of Zimbabwe should not be trusted by being given public purse to resource the public facilities. Is that the case? Certainly no. Let's make our public facilities work again, and education is one of them, and we start with them. So let's go public, fund education. Join me in saying that. Go public. Thank you. That is what we are doing. Now, let's have a look at what is happening. Globally, this is what the world is telling us, that there is a 44 million shortage of teachers. 44 million shortage of teachers globally. I'm not sure what happened when this man was copying my data here. He actually took away all the data. So I'll revert to what I have here. I think the PowerPoint moved. I was using a different approach. So, of the 44 million shortage of teachers, 15 million of them are in the sub-Saharan Africa. That means 15 million shortage of teachers are in what? Africa. And yet Africa is the youngest continent in the world. Africa is one of the most endowed continents with natural resources. And yet this is what we have. This is a dilemma. I hope they will come up with correct. I'll give you the correct thing so that you take all the statistics. You will find that the least developed countries have the least shortage of teachers. We have a problem. Now, when that happens, okay, there it comes. Fine, thank you. So that is the situation. Huh? 15 million learners need, 15 million teachers are needed for learners in Africa. You want to copy it? We're going to share the slide anyway. Please, we'll give it to the Parliament team and then they can share. It's, we believe in common knowledge and sharing knowledge. We don't hide it. We'll give it. Right. There we go. Let's talk about Zimbabwe in Southern Africa. I've given you the global, but we must zero into our situation now. In Southern Africa, this is what is happening. It says sub-Saharan Africa accounts for 50 million, meaning that 1 in every 3 teachers is needed worldwide is found in Africa. Then, out of that, 9 of the 46 sub-Saharan Africa countries are on track in meeting primary level recruitment targets, and just 4 countries in Africa are on track in meeting the demands for secondary school teachers. And Zimbabwe is not one of the 4. And Zimbabwe is not one of the 9 market. So that's scary statistics. In Zimbabwe, there is something that is silently said. Frozen posts. Posts are frozen. There is no employment of teachers. But when the budget comes every year, you will hear an announcement that says for the last 5 years that I've tracked here, you hear an announcement. We are going to employ 8,000 teachers. Have you heard that statement? Yes. But are there the teachers employed. Those who are here, who are in the Ministry of Education, tell the truth. Are you employing teachers? Public Service Commission, are you employing? As no. That announcement does not come to fruition at all. That's scary. Posts are frozen. I'll give you statistics and examples that are live, and my president will add to that. So, headline news in Zimbabwe, they'll tell you that the official teacher-people ratio is 1 to 45. Is that what you know, teachers? And that is what is told in papers and headlines. But on the ground, go there, you will find a teacher has 1 to 60 learners. If you are unfortunate and a teacher goes on maternity leave or goes on leave, you have a ratio of 1 to 80. That's the reality in the schools. Realism is what we're talking about. If you are lucky and that the teacher who passed on and this one went on maternity is not in and is replaced, then you are unfortunate to teach 1 to 20. I've attended senior teachers who have fallen ill, not because they are afraid of the job, because they are overworked, stressed, and fatigued. And now they are having problems. This is the situation in our own country as we talk about the budget. Very scary. And there is something that is very interesting there. The average issue about salary. Because salary is one thing that is also given. I just talked about attrition in relation to teachers who pass on, teachers who are on leave. But there is attrition as a result of teachers who migrate to other countries. And those are the statistics you can see in that issue. And we got them from official sources. Let's look at our situation clearly. By our own estimation as Zimbabwe Teachers Association, trust us, we're a board of knowledge. We are short of 50,000 teachers in the country to support the heritage-based curriculum. This idea of 8,000 comes to nowhere. We are short of 50,000 educators to make this real. If we are going to meet the correct teacher-people ratio, and not only teacher-people ratio, qualified teacher-people ratio, that is what we are dealing with. But compare ourselves with other countries. Can you see our neighbor here, Botswana? What are they saying? They now have an oversupply. Of course, let us not compare ourselves with Malawi. Those of you who have been to Malawi, you know what is happening there. The average class in Malawi is 1 to 30. And the children are sitting on the floors. Is that not this? Do I have MPs from rural constituencies here? Do you have learners sitting on the floor? Yes. That is underfunding education. That is how it speaks. I met a class where infant children were lying on their bellies. And I said, my God, this is 2026. This is 21st century. I was there myself. And for me to go through a system where I had to sit on the floor or lie on the floor to write, and I still see a learner in 2026 doing that, that's an indictment. So where is our number one in education going to? Where is the money going to? And if I may want to ask, where is the money? To make commitments. Wonderful commitments through various forums in the world. We stand in the podium, we take pictures, the media comes and we give speeches that are so wonderful, and we sign Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. Zimbabwe is a seeking to that. It's a commitment to the world, it's a commitment to the future. for the children who have not been born, for the children that we're deciding for now, and when we are all dead and gone. But we're saying the Africa we want. We are a signatory. These are commitments. We are a signatory to the Education Agenda 2030. Is that not so? And we talk about it even in our own country here, Agenda 2030. We're a signatory to that framework, the Incheon Declaration, which, by the way, modified the goals slightly from the Dakar framework. We are a signatory to the United Nations, and recently the United Nations Secretary General brought out 54 recommendations for improving teaching in the world, and Zimbabwe is signed to that. We are a signatory to our own document, the National Development Strategy 2 and DS2. That's not so. We talk about that. These are commitments which make us talk about education. And what are we saying in those commitments? These are wonderful statements that we've said in the commitments. Wonderful statements, glorious statements, written very well, articulately, and we sign. I can bring out the signatures for the Zimbabwean teams that signed to this and show you, yes, we were there. We signed and committed ourselves as a country. There we are. We are making commitments to the African strategy for education. That is what we're saying, and that's what we're saying there. Fortunately, the African strategy to education is citing the United Nations recommendation from the Secretary General as its source of knowledge and reference. But look at our Zimbabwean strategy, NDS2. That's our own making. We are committed to education. That's not so? Now, as we go for the budget, let us remember these commitments. As we go for the budget, let us remember we are a signatory to those wonderful documents and speeches, and we must keep on. But what do the key analytics say about all the commitments we've made? What are the facts on the ground? Wow. The source from that diagram is Zimta. Please quote Zimta if you like. That's our source, we're the authority there. And what are we saying in that aspect? Budget allocations 2021 to 2026. Please forgive me for 2024. 2024 is a very difficult year to compute in terms of budget analysis because there were three currencies that we transacted in 2024. Remember? From ZWG to ZIG to US dollar. Now, to change that, you lose a lot of things in the process. So I decided not to make that as a comparative year because it doesn't give us very good statistics. In this aspect, this is what is happening. This is what we gave. This is from our blue book. We all know the blue book, right? Yeah. I'm not bringing in new figures here. This is from our own blue book. These are our figures. This is what we passed in Parliament. Fine. But what does that mean in terms of allocations? Mathematically, in terms of budget allocation, 16.8, 10.8, 17.5, 20.7, 19.9. That is effectively what it meant in terms of budget allocation. In terms of aligning ourselves to the commitments we made in the Incheon Declaration and Agenda 2030 for education, we are within range. Wonderful. We are within range. That's good. We're wonderful. We're in range. But if we're within range, and we have a ratio of 1 to 8 children, and we are within range, and we have children who have no furniture, we are within range, and we have children with no textbooks. What does that say about the adequacy of the range? It says something, the range is wrong. The range is not a Zimbabwean range. We must talk about Zimbabwean education. The range is putting us. We are radically different. We must change it. That's a challenge. So we may not be comfortable with the range that was given in the Incheon Declaration. We must be comfortable with the issue of our own NTS2 when we want to change and bring out people who are productive, who can bring out the wealth of our country. That means we must bring education, which is more than the Incheon range. You see that? That is simple, because the realities on the ground are talking about something else. Last the range in a graphical form, but I've just said those things in those figures. That's what we are. Happy? Are we happy about that? Certainly we can't. If I was going to mark you, I will mark you down. Sure. You are D category students. Please raise your marks to C. At least be average. According to Zimbabwean standard. I didn't say according to Incheon what? Standard. According to Zimbabwean standard. That's a challenge. That's what the analytics say. Now, when you go down and look at the analytics and what's happening on the ground, you have even more frightening statistics if you are going to use the GDP. According to the statistics, in the range, in the budget range, we are within Incheon range. But when we come to look at the GDP Incheon range, we are below, because we have never raised it to that. The Incheon range says at least 4 to 6% of the GDP must be allocated to education. What it means is the key that we bake in any given year, the 100% of the cake that we bake every year for the wealth of the country, if we took out about 4% of it or to 6% of it and gave it to education, we could be close to financing education. That's what it means. So when we look at all what we saw there in the range in budget data terms, it tells us that we have never been beyond 3% of the budget allocation. Currently, I want to give you, somebody can give me this from the crowd. Okay, we have got also other participants who are joining us virtually, and I think they can even join us when they intervene. The current budget, the current GDP of Zimbabwe is 52 billion, am I right? The wealth of the country is 52 billion, right? Eh? How much? Yeah. Okay. Let me not challenge you on that one. Because we may need to go into economics. Minister of Finance, those who are in the portfolio committee of finance, can you help us? What's the total wealth of the country? Yes, sir.
That's the total, 55 billion.
Thank you. That's the total, 55 billion. I'm comfortable with 55 billion. This is 2026 side. Yes, let's do a quick multiplication. Can you give us 6% of 55 billion? What is 6% of 55 billion? Quick mathematics, just like that. What is 6% of 55 billion?
3.3 billion.
3.3
billion.
Oh, how about giving education 3.3 billion in 2027? Because I'm saying the children have not read the books. The teachers are not enough. They are underpaid. And we are crying. That's Zimbabwe's NDS. So let's deal with it. So I'm suggesting no figure, but I'm saying, why don't we then go to the GDP as a measure of our budget allocation as opposed to the budget process allocation? Because somewhere in the budget trends, the figures are shrouded. We can't see them. They're embalmed. They're hidden. Let's go to the GDP and see what happens. The total wealth is a representation of our fund. Can you see that? That's what the figures say. Let's make a comparison. Of course, you see, when you compare yourself, you don't compare yourself alone. You also compare yourself with the other countries. Is that right? Look at our neighbors. I don't want to compare myself with Mozambique and Malawi for obvious reasons, but I want to put Zimbabwe alongside South Africa, Botswana, and Namibia. Where are we here? We're almost comfortable because we said in the budget process, we are almost at 20%. Did you see those figures I flashed earlier on? We are doing well comparatively with South Africa and Botswana. But look at what Namibia is doing. Namibia is 24. Yeah, 2 million inhabitants are beating us. Can't we do better and go beyond what Namibia has done? That's a challenge I'm living. I'm not saying anything about the next budget, but you are hearing us. There is no money. Please give us more money for the education we want in Zimbabwe. Not for the Africa we want, but for the Zimbabwe we want. That's the challenge. Having said that, colleagues, let me just give you those, why I was giving those two benchmarks there. Yeah. If we can improve on the budget processes, let us increase the share of the GDP. Because the education is holding a small pie from the GDP. So this is a strong policy implication for Parliament. A change of direction in Parliament. Analyze the budget on GDP terms. And that is now a policy shift. As you analyze the budget, then you look at it in terms of the GDP. We'll be very happy to see that. Beyond the headline ratios, let us look at 6 more other things that indicate our budget is real. Real versus nominal spending growth. We have seen that every year our budget is always high, that's right. And we celebrate that it is high. But what is high there are nominal figures. They are not real figures because they are not transformative in nature. They are not responding to the problems in nature. So if you deflate those figures, you may find that in 1 year where you're saying you gave 1.5 billion, you actually gave less because you are going to use the cost price index to deflate the budget allocation. And when you do that, you may find the real thing is that you did not increase at all. So we must deflate these budgets as they come to us. Invite us when it's time to do that. We can come and discuss collectively. Like we said, Community Chair, we are available to discuss and assist in those skills and say, let's analyze this. The guys in finance can always twist you with the words and figures, but when we want to say, what money that will transform the learner, and this is how we are seeing it, it's seated somewhere there. Right. And one thing that we should be proud of as Zimbabweans, let us mark it, it is the domestic funding of our education. Education is funded by our own people, our own budget. We are not dependent on external donors. That's wonderful. Because 94% of our budget is funded by our own people. The SDCs, the fiscal, that's wonderful. That is what we call budget sovereignty. Well done, budget sovereignty. But in terms of trouble, we definitely do need external helpers. Is that not so? We do need external helpers when we have trouble. We can actually do with some help. So we cannot throw. We cannot throw it away completely. We need it. I give an example here of the GPE, the Global Partnership in Education. We are members and we receive money for that purpose. I give you here for the Education Can't Wait, ECW. They are sending money into Zimbabwe. We can do with pledges or pledging on how we can stop the leakages in funding education. And then we say, can you support us? That is wonderful. We must look at the learner to teacher people ratio. Honestly, how do you expect a teacher to to go through the whole day with the 4-year-olds, 64-year-olds. When you are alone at home, uchinetsa kuti vazukuru vaviri chete tu vazukuru vari kunetesa kuti orara wakaneta kuti these boys are troublesome, but you give them to a teacher, 60 of them, and say bring education out of, bring 120 of 4-year-olds. I have to correct. And sometimes they mess up themselves, you must clean them. They mess up themselves, break the back, you must clean them. Before you go for learning all these activities, how do we do it? Tell me, that's the challenge. So in terms of funding education, let's improve. The teacher-learner ratio should be 1:20 in those instances, but currently we have 1:50. If I'm lying, maybe people from education can tell me, but this is what I find on the ground, and this is serious. Debt to service ratio. Tine zvikwereti zvakawanda kuna IMF, ndizvo zvinotaura akawanda IMF, World Bank. Now is time. Let's talk about that. Takataura vanhu nemasanction tikati risai masanction vakatinzwai. Handitika katimbopa kutaurirai gore rino kuti chimbotisiyai nezvikwereti izvi titange tatarisa zvinhu zvepublic service. Hatigoni here kukumbira izvozvo. We started a movement about how can we cancel debt. Some debts can be cancelled. And finance helped me. Some debts can be cancelled. But Zimbabwe is tight. Tashunga mbira dzakondo. Hatifambi nezvikwereti izvozvo zve-IMF ne-World Bank. And this is where we are competing with the resources because we have to pay those countries. So the debt to service ratio, we must now revisit and say, let's pay 5% or let's revisit it and do something dramatic there. Right? The program level mix and the SDG for alignment in terms of that is critical as well to measure the gross run. Now, another measure that you can use using the learner to teacher people ratio is to understand how many learners are in Zimbabwe. Averagely, we are about 4 to 5 million, right? Learners in the country, in the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education, which is 4.6. They hover around that. When you look at the budgets that we give them, look at that. Very scary. In 2021, the budget we allocated was saying every learner was given $148 for the whole year to buy textbooks, to pay the teacher, to build the classroom, to honestly, $148 for the whole year. Is that realistic? When you reduce it to per capita, that's when you see the scary figures. What's happening here? Can a learner go the whole year on $300? Something is wrong, that right? In private education, that is impossible. Have you seen it? Those of you who have children in private schools, you are paying through your nose. Remember so? $2,500 for a term. Remember so? For one learner. $2,500. But in public schools, we say we can do it 278 for the whole year. Divide that by 3 terms. That means per term is how much per learner that we are giving as fiscus allocation. That's a challenge. So we need to do something dramatic there. Then let's quickly look at the budget disbursements. We've passed the budget. Education is the highest. No, education was given 1.5 billion. Education was given 1.5 billion. Yes. What's the reality? Or I speak. Look at a practical example, which we are going to learn even from the president when it comes to the beam money, which is supposed to support the schools. The 278 I'm talking about. the beam money? When was it last disbursed?
4 years ago.
Practically 4 years ago. So kune vana vakapinda chikoro, right? Vaita form 1, form 2, form 3, form 4, vakaenda zvisina kubva. Because the parent yacho ine nharo, parent yacho inonzi hurumende. Rinobva. Ndekusungisa here parent yacho iyoyi. Because ndozvatinoudzwa muzvikoro kuti vaparents vasakabhadhari sungisai. Toita sei neparent inonzi beam? Beam yacho ndi hurumende. Iudzei kunhai veduwe. Ndosungisa sei this parent isingabhadhari mari inonzi beam? Iparent kai handitizo. The writers in the road, but it's good, it's related. Look at that capacity. In infrastructure, for example, there was money set aside, but only 9% of it was dispersed for infrastructure development. Meaning 91% iri kumusango somewhere, yakasara somewhere, is hanging somewhere. Mariacho yo. Infrastructure. That's the analysis of the 2025-2026 budget. Which bill shot up by 225%, meaning there was either a miscalculation or a deliberate underplay of saying salaries will not be paid. But because the salaries were to be paid, maybe when a president they to go to the streets and think, we want money, and then the money was given and there was an over expenditure. So we cannot therefore underestimate the needs of the teachers and hope to solve the problem of funding education by suppressing their needs. It's impossible. We may need to budget properly there. Right? So generally, this is how we spend the money, and not to take too much time, you will look at that as well. Then I look at programs, special programs, look at how they are faring. Zimsec, for example, had 756 million. But how much did it overspend by? 260%, right? Then go and look at sanitary well. Behind every decision, there is a learner who must go to school. There is that girl child who must go to school. Sanitary well. How much was budgeted? 500 million. How much was sent? 74. A severe shortfall. A decision not to send the girl child to school by not funding their sanitary well. That's a decision. That's a choice we made. These are the figures. They speak Zeka. With the good part is that numbers don't lie. So there we are, honorables. So what are my key findings for you? It is very exciting that education remains Zimbabwe's single largest budget vote, even beyond what we have reviewed now, 5 years I've talked about. This, let us hold dearly, is a genuine policy priority. We are prioritizing education in Zimbabwe. That's good. That mindset of prioritizing education is good. What is left now is to be relative to the figures which are realistic and transformative. Measured against GDP, education spending has never met the Indian declaration or Indian floor of 4 to 6%. So it has never met, meaning that we have been hiding behind the budget average instead of the GDP. So if you go to the GDP, when I say it, Let's take 6% of GDP, and we say it is 3 billion. I saw the face and said, where can this money come from? How do we do it? But that's really. But the other things there are clear is what we discussed before. So the gap between our GDP and the gap between the two benchmarks must be explored. They are a key issue there. So let's not celebrate too much on the budget. Let's celebrate when the two are meeting, the GDP allocation and our own. Budget credibility is therefore weak. So I've stopped ululating when the budget is announced because its credibility is weak at implementation. I no longer ululate when I hear that education has been given a lot of money because I know that is nominal and may not be the real money that will land on this and the coffers of the school, in the coffers of the schools. So we need to improve on that one. What are the 10 recommendations that I'm giving to Parliament today? Those are there. Let us standardize our reporting. When you look for figures in education in Zimbabwe, there are two ministries. You have to hunt for higher education, hunt for primary secondary education, and to put them together. I think if we can standardize the reporting mechanism there, we can improve in the way our figures can be found, even worked over for advice, for example, or for pledges that we may want to make with the international donors. Let's target the GDP share gap directly. I think that's a fair result. Let's target that one. Let's protect non-wage lines, like I exemplified the issue of the sanitary where we must ring-fence it, protect it somehow. That will help. Let us institutionalize disbursement tracking so that the oversight of Parliament there is an institution that has to track the budget disbursements, not to wait for the end of the year or for a pre-budget seminar. It is every time, so that this doesn't become a civil society issue, but it becomes a parliamentary issue. It becomes your role as parliamentarians. I'm not sure whether that is happening, but if it's not, it has happened. The other recommendation, I already indicated it there, increase the share of public spending to the GDP. So again, that is important. Campaign for debt forgiveness and relief cancellation. I don't know if that is asking too much. I don't know the politics in there and the problems, but let us campaign for debt cancellation for Zimbabwe, at least to give us breathing space for public services. Let's not celebrate what these guys are telling us, particularly the IMF guys. We do meet them sometimes in certain spaces, and we tell them secretly, you guys, you are killing public services by telling government to have a cap on the spending of public services. But yet in your own countries, your public services are the best. Is that not so? Those who have traveled world over, you know that transport system, for example, in developed countries is excellent. Public service transport. They're not doing the same thing. So, but they advise us here to keep public services. So let's deal with that aspect. Let us monitor SDG 4 and censor progress, but most importantly, let us fight corruption in the disbursement of funds and the expenditure of funds. When you are asking for companies to come in the bidding, unoita sei kune zvimwe zviri kuitika ikoko ngazvigadzirwe izvozvo zvine corruption mukati. Let's make a budget pledge as to how we are going to improve. We continue to improve. We are good at domestic funding, but what do we pledge to improve around our domestic funding? Those are just but a few recommendations I would like you to think about and leave you with. And as we march forward, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by encouraging you to do these two things. Let Zimbabwe become known not only for prioritizing education in principle, but for financing it in practice. The measure of our commitment will not be in the speeches we make about education, but the resources we place in the hands of those who teach our children, your teachers. No nation can be better than its teachers. That we must add. Every great nation is built first in a classroom. And every classroom stands upon the shoulders of a teacher. When we underfund teachers, we do not merely reduce salaries, we reduce opportunity, innovation, productivity, and the future of our children. Madam Chair, I thank you and rest my case.
Many thanks there to Dr. Ndlovu for that informative presentation. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Dr. Ndlovu. Dr. Ndlovu's presentation was a mouthful, so I will try, but only try a little bit to highlight some of the major outcomes that came from his presentation. He talked about teacher shortage and that the figures that we hear that are being amplified in the public spaces versus what is on the ground are totally different things. We need more teachers in the public education system. The current teacher-pupil ratio is unrealistic. It affects the quality of public education delivery and also the results that we are getting in the schools. He talked about Zimbabwe being a signatory to many forums and commitments, world commitments, but back home, what are we doing about it? What are the implementation steps that we are taking? We need to have more commitment there. And as we go for our 2027 national budget, he talked about, he reminded us of the commitments that we've done through NDS2, where we prioritized education, that let's remember that we have prioritized education and let's act. And he also made a proposal that maybe if we are going to be increasing education share in real terms, maybe we need to calculate it using our GDP, our gross domestic product. And he also talked about Parliament getting help and support from very effective bodies such as the Education Cannot Wait organization and also the GPE Forum. I'm sure if Parliament was to engage these groups, maybe there will be something coming from there. And he made another very interesting proposal where he is saying that as unionists, as parliamentarians, as policymakers, we could start a campaign for debt cancellation for Zimbabwe. We desperately need this money. This money that we are paying to IMF could do something better for us here back home. Let's start this campaign. Let's see where it takes us. This was one of the proposals. And then probably as I conclude, he also talked about the disbursement of the budget, which is to do with implementation and, of course, transparency. So thank you very much, Dr. Ndlovu. Those were some of the few items that among the many items that he talked about this morning, food for thought. Maybe some of them are implementable, some of them will take some time. but surely they are doable.